Hello and welcome back to Raging Loop. So we've completed the main story, we've gotten the true ending, and we have 6 side stories. There's 5. I don't know why I thought it was 6, there's 5 side stories left. I don't know how long they are. It could be, I don't know, 10 minutes each, could be an hour each. Don't ask me, we're gonna find out. I have been sick the past couple of days, so my throat is still a little bit messed up, so I won't be doing any sort of outlandish voices. Yeah, I'll try to still differentiate a little bit, but I'll try to read it fairly I don't know what the word is for it, but I'll try to not screw my throat anymore. But yeah, we'll just start with the first one. Huntress versus Bear. Illusion comedy. What did he have to say? Comedy, horror, comedy, documentary, okay? The land of the Great North brings with it a trial, a fight with a new god, the bizarre adventure of an unfunny hero and swindler. Alright. Now this is a predicament. It really is. I, Haruaki Fusashi, and she, Chiemi Serizawa, were in a predicament. Oh wow, what a cliched phrase. It's so shitty. Hold on. You women shouldn't say shit. So I'm a pretty woman. You really think we should flirt just because there's no one else here? She was the only one flirting here, but anyway. Yeah, the fact that there was no one around was actually risky to us. When I'd gotten lost in the Kachihara area, Mount Saranashi, otherwise known as Shinai, but that wouldn't last much longer, I felt I was in a lot of danger. But this time the danger was completely different. First, this wasn't a mountain, but an endless plain with an endless forest on an endless road. Everything was endless. As we talked about whether this was really Japan and whether the land was testing us, we'd gotten lost on a forest road. Naturally, there was no reception here. It was nothing magical, though. We were just too far from civilization. And, well, my bike was broken. The engine had made an ominous noise and stopped providing power properly. It felt dangerous, so I stopped driving and it fell completely silent. We were stuck in the middle of Mother Nature. This was Hokkaido, the northernmost part of Japan. It was an autonomous region and an island with a surface area 40 times bigger than Tokyo. It was the breadbasket of Japan and the mecca of agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Why were we here, you wonder? On a whim, of course. Let's go as far away as possible. You got it. And that was all she wrote. We'd been riding my bike ever since Chiemi infiltrated my home and workplace. We went up north, then took a ferry in Sendai to Hokkaido. While being jostled around by the boat for a whole day, I did consider whether going as far away as possible was a good idea. But the difference in air and scenery we found once we disembarked swept all those doubts away. This was definitely a special place. I could totally understand why so many people insisted on spending money and time going on bike trips to Hokkaido. The experience of escaping the heat of Honshu and going through a pleasant open space full of life was precious. Naturally, the trip was great up until this happened, but we were now at significant risk of changing our minds. But I learned maintenance in case of events like this. I even have some tools. Oh, you did say that. To think you were so undependable back then. I can hardly recognize you. Crap, this ain't fixable. You're really great at disappointing girls, huh? No, I mean, look. Whoa, it's completely busted. And look at this fluid. It's so wet. I mean, that's, I would argue, fluids usually are. Yet it still tries to work. What a slutty bike. You were doing that on purpose? I was also thinking about that. Don't underestimate my pervertedness. Jokes aside, this is pretty bad. Did we hit something? The tube providing coolant had completely fallen off, while the metal parts supporting it were destroyed. I had no memory of hitting something. It wasn't bent in any way, and the damage was very clean. It might be an early failure. Oh, that sucks, and it's new too. Well, at least we know exactly what's wrong. We'd lost the coolant and the engine had overheated. That was that. Unfortunately, I couldn't connect this pipe properly, but I could just barely fix it with the duct tape I had. For now, if I cooled off the engine and found some water nearby to replace the coolant, we would continue going even if the water leaked. So, do you have anything we can use for water? Yep. Hokkaido was a long trip, so we didn't come completely unprepared. There were some plastic containers on the bike that made it look pretty uncool, and Chiemi had a... how do you even pronounce that in English? Rucksack? On her. They had some food and clothing for colder climates inside, and one of them had 2 empty 2-liter plastic bottles. It was pretty hot yesterday, so we emptied the sports drinks inside and just kept them with us. It was cloudy and chilly today. It was better than blazing heat, but that caused me to forget to get some water. Alright, let's park the bike on the side of the road and get some water. We gotta get enough to make up for the leaks and get the thing repaired once we get somewhere where we can do it. That seems like the best way. Where can we get water here though? According to the map, there's a river beyond this forest. It'll work out if we can get there. Sure we won't get lost? It's about 1 kilometer in, not that risky, and even if we get lost, we can just follow the river and come across this road at the bridge a few kilos down. I don't think I've ever heard anyone abbreviate kilometers as kilos. That sounds so wrong. Isn't it dangerous? I don't know what kind of river it is, but if it seems dangerous, we can just stay away. At worst, we can just walk to the settlement just 12 or so kilometers away. How's that for a plan? Good enough. After that incident, we'd become a bit more careful than before. Why? Because we now had only 1 life and no resets. Both Jamie and I were the kind to push ourselves a bit too hard, so situations like this could often endanger our lives. Thus, we would casually, but with certainty, focus on safety. I was careful not to drive dangerously, and Chiemi was learning a lot about such trips from the handbooks she'd bought along the way. For a couple that had repeatedly killed each other in a dream, we actually had a pretty nice thing going. Sorry for the trouble. It's okay. Going on a trip like this was my idea, though I was surprised when you suggested we go to Hokkaido. Seriously, sorry. Honestly, it's kind of my fault for not saying anything about it until it was way too late. Exactly. I was waiting for you to say something, so why didn't you? What's with the sudden 180? Don't you understand that this is the sort of thing that makes it hard for us to stay honest? I just want to implement some hardcore entertainment in all of my communications. So you're Kamchatking Chicago while using compliant dolls of Alsace and Lothringen as rainmakers? What on earth does any of that mean? Yeah. Oh yeah? Hi there, bear. A brown bear. A mature one weighed between 300 and 500 kilos. They were the apex of land animals in Japan. Omnivorous, but loved meat. Special skills, bear claw and bear hug. I heard that bears are calm by default. He should run away if we make sounds that don't startle him, like... I am Chiemi Serizawa. I'm covered in oil and delicious. Ow, that sound put her in peril. Run, you dumbass. Seeing Chiemi scream and run brought me back to my senses. Why was I choking around with a bear? Don't turn your back on him. They chase after you when you do that. What if I do the bridge run? You insane blockhead. Should I just abandon you? I'm sorry. The bear was large enough that I had to look up to see its face. Standing up, it was over 3 meters tall. It roared and flailed its arms towards the bike. He's interested in a bike. Let's run now. Run where? I don't know, but just don't stop. The young couple ran backwards through the endless forest. Oh, the bike toppled. Please stop. I ran. Once the bear was out of sight, I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I was the first to run out of breath, but Jamie was becoming exhausted herself. I was pretty sure we'd ran about 3 full kilometers. Let me process this situation. Go ahead. We were attacked by a brown bear? Yeah, Is that it? Yeah. Looks like your comments don't actually make me feel much more alive. You don't? Sorry, Haruki, but the fatigue and stress are kind of more important than that right now. Sorry. Honestly, the sudden appearance of a bear at that timing made me feel like I was trapped in some kind of comedy movie. The North must be pretty messed up to send out a brown bear as a joke. Honestly, I still don't know what to make of that. It's a brown bear. Want to stop for a sec? You're underestimating bears. If they feel like it, they can become obsessive hunters. You gotta find people. And there's no guarantee that there's just one of... Are cameras? The appearance of the second made Chiyomi lose her grip on the situation. I grabbed her by her collar and started backing away. The new one was smaller than the other and didn't seem all that aggressive. Was it a female? The way she tilted her head was actually cute. But this was actually a wild animal. She could probably kill us while thinking something like, "Oh my, what's this strange meat?" Seeing the panicking humans before her made her realize the danger, and to us that was more dangerous than any moment in the Feast of the Yomi Purge. As we ran, the second bear chased after us. Were it a human, we could sing it a song about bears and run off, but that wouldn't work on this beast. As Chiyomi panicked, I calmed her down, then thought of a way to get out of this. Of course, there was a golden rule for getting away from a bear. I took off the bag on my back and threw it at the bear. Naturally, the bear followed it with interest, buying us some distance. Lots of it, even. I think we're far enough. Upon saying that, I realized I fucked up. I knew where this was going. Wait, how? This wasn't a manga or a game, right? There was no way that would apply. My thoughts were still in fiction creation mode. That had to be why I was acting so weird about this. I didn't have the energy to react anymore, so I just took Chiyomi's hand and ran. I hated TV culture and the humor of its comedians. Both would be useless in a fight for survival in the wild. They would just waste my energy turning decisiveness into jokes. I knew that was unreasonable, which seemed to show that I was saner than Chiyomi at least. If I survive, I'll trash all the TV sets that did bear pranks and all anime with bears in them. She charged as fast as she could, and her voice was dense with madness and seriousness. Crap, I needed her to stay sane. And no, I wouldn't destroy bear anime. Their lives would be in danger, especially the yellow one. Oh. Again? Something wasn't right here. We met bears no matter where we went, yet we were still alive. Incidentally, we'd left the road a long time ago and were now lost in an unfamiliar forest. That made the likelihood of running into bears all that much higher. What the hell was this? Bear world? A trap of some kind? Were we being chased into our deaths? Oh, if only we had God to help us this time. However, her holy land was hundreds of kilos away, and the lord of a mountain where you only had moon bears would probably faint upon seeing these beasts. And she probably had bad chemistry with Chiyomi. Oh no. Chiyomi had said that right after the incident. She'd left Yasumizu and returned to college. Though she no longer thought that she didn't belong there, she didn't consider Yasumizu to be her ultimate home. Also, well, she probably cared about me too. That was why she got in touch with Mitsuji and became friends with her. Human relations sure were something. Oh no. What I wanted to say was, that was the reason why I thought that she and God wouldn't get along, since God was basically tied to that general area. After the incident, Chiyomi had been able to settle the score with God and change her perception of the concept. However, that didn't mean that she could get along with her. Unlike her, I couldn't see God, but I figured that she no longer loomed over her. Oh no. Oh no. As we ran around, not sure what was going on, we arrived at a certain place. It was pretty large. Half of it was basically a rock large enough to look up at, while the other half was countless withered trees. though they were just 2 to 3 meter long wooden sticks that were placed against a rock. The materials were natural, but the result sure wasn't. I felt a similar thing like when I saw the Okiba. It seemed to blend in with the environment, but it was clearly somewhat unnatural. I looked around, all alert. There were no brown bears around for the time being, but... Haruki. Yeah? There's God here. Huh? Chimi looked at the structure with distant eyes. She then closed them, joined her hands, and bowed. It looked so extremely natural and spontaneous that I didn't know how to react. So I joined my own hands. Let's use it. Huh? What do you mean? This is a home someone left. A home? I walked up and realized she was speaking the truth. All that running took us from a plain to a mountain area. The trees here were paired with large boulders. The largest rocks of them all, canopied by an overhang of withered trees, had a little bit of space on the inside you could live in. The boulders and the withered trees were like a roof and walls. Of course it did little against the rain and wind, but it could handle snow probably. This might have been a winter residence. There was dried grass near the withered trees too, and indeed this did seem like a proper dwelling. The iron pan hanging on one branch made it clear that someone had been living here. Pardon the intrusion. Unperturbed, Chiyomi promptly took off her shoes and entered. She then sat down in the middle. Haruki, let's rest here. It's safe, apparently. Apparently? Who did you hear that from? I'd ask, but I figured it was pointless. I then took off my shoes, which was probably some sort of gesture of respect, and sat down on the soft, dry grass. Though the only things separating us from the outside were rocks and withered trees, the inside felt a bit different than the outside. It actually felt like a peaceful place to rest. Boundary. That word came to mind. The edge of a territory is a boundary, and talks between men and gods can be had through them. I'd realized that the god in that incident that Chiyomi was afraid of was a kind of information-based organism. It was hard to admit it, but it had a human-like awareness and intelligence, though I wasn't sure about its sense of identity. Anyway, unlike other organisms, it didn't need a body, DNA, or any physical memory storage to sustain its life, its information. It used some way of recording itself in natural and artificial objects as elaborately concealed information. Then, when recognized by intelligent organisms, they would influence their consciousness and become manifest. Then the affected human would leave God behind in some way and spread effectively living on. It reminded me of a famous horror novel, the one about the dead person who appeared on a cursed video. The movie version was famous for its representation of ghosts, but the theme of the original novel was the ever-spreading, evolving visual information. Video was itself a type of data too, and conversion flaws, editing, and changes in film were like DNA mutations. And the curse spread through fear by stimulating people's egoistical life functions. Since it couldn't multiply by itself, it made others spread it instead. In that sense, it was much like a virus. Viruses too were creatures without much besides their DNA. They were barely alive. So they hacked living cells and just copied themselves. What a hell of a survival strategy. God was like this too. The only difference was that God was righteousness, and spread by manipulating people's need to be right as an intermediary. That particular god was a gathering of rules created over the centuries by people who feared the mountain. The mountain couldn't be looked down upon. Compared to it, humans were just dust. The mountain could bring forth the supernatural. The mountain was Yomi. Yomi was darkness. That was why she, through human and animal fears, could completely control humans and animals that acknowledged her. However, God wasn't almighty. Since gods were righteousness, or the state of being right, and prioritized what was right above all, they were bound by their own rules. The primary problem was residence. Though Japan wasn't too religious, there was a latent idea that there was a god living in everything. However, that meant that not everything in their lives was controlled by a single god. Eating, excreting, reproducing, working, sleeping, crimes, marriage, funerals, festivals. The idea was that everything in life was controlled by a different god. That meant that the sphere in which a single god reigned, not necessarily physically, was extremely and strictly limited. The god in Haru represented the mountain, Yomi, darkness, and dreams. Thus, she couldn't manifest anywhere else as long as she continued doing what was considered right. The place where it was right for her to be was the boundary. This place was probably a boundary for the god of those who lived here and built these dwellings. The ancient people of Hokkaido. The Ainu. I looked around the interior. There were old blackened sawdust-like decorations that I'd never seen in any other culture. I wasn't knowledgeable about this, but I could feel it in my bones that this had been left behind by the ones living here. We were receiving help from a different culture. It was best to think that the whole thing with the bears wasn't some natural gag. Like, that was a thing. I suddenly felt something on my right shoulder. Jimmy had closed her eyes and fallen asleep. She probably got too comfortable. Well, even bike passengers grew tired. And we'd been running around for so long, I could totally understand her. But there was something unexpected. She could see gods that normal people couldn't unless they manifested themselves. It used to be a scary, unnerving, and troublesome existence for her. She still wasn't able to explain it beyond the abstract feeling she had, but I could somewhat understand her. God survived by clinging to human instincts and leveraging them to reproduce. However, that action was only beneficial to the god, not the people. In fact, we'd recently dealt with a god that was warped so badly it made people kill themselves or others, though it had been distorted by the human work known as the Shinai faith. God had a mind of its own and could easily force the people into destroying themselves for its sake. Chimi could actually see it. It was covering most people she knew, and that was surely a scary idea. I was sure I would have been scared of and hated God if I was in her shoes. I wanted to set my own rules, after all. Chimi said that I had no God on me, and that was probably true. I had no sense of right and wrong. The most I could do was copy other people's rightness. Being fixated on my own rules instead of what was right was probably my way of rebelling against God. But rebellions often failed, and that was why I'd ended up housing God inside of me a few times. If I'd lived in that mountain alongside Rikako, I might have become a righteous person too. Though with Rikako, I couldn't be sure. She might have infected me with her aero-grotesque god and turned me into her demonic servant. That actually didn't seem that bad. I was pretty interested in destroying Japan with Rikako alongside me. Why are you grinning like that? I'm enjoying your warmth. I'm not enjoying your lie, though. Sorry, I just had some bad thoughts. I really am glad to have you with me. Well, you're a guy. I'll allow it. You awake? Yeah, I had a dream. What kind? Where I was surrounded by brown bears. That was real. Hey, the dream was full of brown bears too. Though they were a bit different and I didn't find them scary. One of them actually talked to me. What a fairy tale. I wanted to say that out loud, but couldn't. In many cultures, dreaming was the right way to meet God. What did he say? She spoke words I didn't know, but I knew what they meant. Send him over. Him? Who? I did have an assumption, though. I also guessed why we were sent here. Or why we, or just her, were chosen. You know where we're supposed to go? Probably. What's the method? Chimi closed her eyes and searched through the dry grass spread out on the ground. Found it. She took it out. A quiver? It was made of wood and leather, and there were detailed patterns carved on its sides. Inside there were 3 bright brown arrows. The feathers were brown and white, probably belonged to a bird of prey. All of it seemed too new to be relics. There's a bow here too. Jimmy took a bent wooden stick. It was also really elegant and had an amber string at one of its ends. She skillfully bent it, picked up the string and hooked it to the other end. With that, the bow was complete. I thought you only knew how to use guns. Well, that's what I thought too, but I somehow just knew how to do this. She put the quiver over her shoulder, took the bow in hand, grabbed the string with the other, pulled it back and released. A sound. I'd heard that playing with bowstrings repelled evil, but I wasn't sure if that applied here. But can you send him with this? I wasn't knowledgeable about this, but that bow and arrows seemed too weak for a proper battle. We're using poison, apparently. Poison? Yeah, the one that killed you once. Now that wasn't something I wanted to remember. Found it. She crouched before some grass that had patches of purple on it. Aconite. Yeah, you could also use jack in the pulpit. Pine, resin, river bug. There's no river here. Whatever, this will work. You're being like Mochi right now. You're not wrong. Sure you're not being controlled? Yeah, I just feel that the brown bear in the dream taught me this. I see. It was divine info, and I knew various ways through which it could be passed on. One example was the methodology behind the feast, which was too thorough for it to be word of mouth. I couldn't perceive the god here or the bear dream Chiemi had seen. The talent for seeing God might have been more powerful and profound than it first seemed. I'll dig. Thankfully I still have my biking gloves. It's better than doing it barehanded. You sure? Yeah, I can't do much besides help after all. Huh? Well, you're helping, but I want you to help me with something more serious. I had no idea why, but I instantly understood that the role she'd give me was bad news. Anyway, I'll just dig. Thanks. Whatever, this was a good role split. After all, she was the hero who'd killed God. As I dug up the aconite, I realized there were brown bears watching over us from a distance. Just watching, though, not closing in. We knew they meant no harm this time, so neither Chiemi nor I were afraid. I just understood that this was just the kind of place it was. I brought back the poisonous plants, and we placed their extract in one of the plastic bottles. We then dipped the tips of the 3 arrows in, creating the poison arrows. While we worked, Chiemi was whispering something as though she was praying. It was a prayer to the god of poison, one of the countless gods of the Yao Yorozu. Her sincerity made it impossible for me to joke about it, so I just silently watched over her. Honestly, I found her beautiful right now. Fantastical even. I could almost imagine her wearing the ancient traditional clothing of the people who lived here. Other things that came to mind were eagles, wolves, and blonde ninjas. Crap, that was just fiction. Begone my weird delusions. Also, I had no business being in touch with any god. That wasn't in my nature. I simply wanted to be free from anything, god or not, trying to bind me and do whatever I could as a free man. In this case, that was... Anyway, you'll be bait. I expected this. God damn it. I laughed when the bear in the dream said that it didn't matter if you died. Why do gods look down on me so? Well, I could understand them though. Anyway, I parted ways with Chiemi and started looking around all by myself, though I was actually just carefully moving forward. This was an animal trail. The grass carpet here was thin, and the young trees siding it were like a fence, making it somewhat clear that it was actually a road, a beast path. Body odor, reek of excreta, remains of hair, claw marks. It had plenty of info for you to conclude that this was beast territory. Unfortunately, we humans weren't sensitive enough to catch such hints. Thus, it was easy for us to get lost on a beast trail. It wasn't meant for human feet. It led to the realm of the mountain god. However, I didn't feel like I could get lost here. The gazes of the brown bears at the sides kept me on the road. That meant that I was on the right path. This was the path once crossed by the god we'd hunt. Jamie was hiding about 100 steps behind me. Now I just need to wait until it showed up. Still nothing? I'd been walking for an hour. It was actually getting to me now. Was Jamie still behind me? Oh, was the divine mission she'd been given even right? What if we had to do something completely different? Like sacrifice me, for example. Well, I really didn't think I was hated enough to become a target right away, but still. What if our positions were reversed? If it was me, leading someone stuck in Hokkaido into a super dangerous scenario. Then, as they somehow survive, cracking a smile and telling them it was just a prank. Man, would that be fun? Crap, I was actually worried right now. I wasn't sure if I could survive if someone got back at me for what I usually did. I turned around and headed 100 steps behind me to cheer me. She wasn't here. She actually abandoned me. Shouldn't have trusted her so easily. Right, she'd said she'd be my enemy. Our relationship was all about who could fool the other more. What was I to do now? How could I survive this? I heard a growl behind me. Don't turn your back on him. They chase after you when you do that. So that was it. Basically, I was going through one of those myths where turning around meant defeat. God's passage showed its true form when you turn away. And I had just turned around and walked 100 steps to find Chiemi. My back had been exposed to the anomaly. Knowing that it was too late, I faced forward again. What I saw there was a way too large brown bear, covered in a black miasma. This was definitely the boss, this evil aura, those shining eyes, the bloodlust that emanated from every part of its body. Yeah. It stood on its hind legs and swung its two giant claws at me, making me jump backwards. The trees, young and dead, as well as the earth beneath, went everywhere. My flesh wasn't among the stuff. Yay! Oops, I accidentally pressed shift. Yeah, stop it. But the monster's specialty was going on all fours. Upon realizing it missed, it got down and charged at me, and I was unable to get back up. My death was imminent. I'd solved such a major incident, and now I'd die to some bear monster I met after going to Hokkaido on a whim. What kind of reader could tolerate this? Shit. Once I died, I would become a really annoying ghost and go around shooting lewd things around Chimiserizawa. I should have already been dead, but I wasn't, so I opened my eyes. At that moment, the giant frame began to collapse. There were 3 poison arrows in it, the head, the shoulder, and stomach. With a tremor, the creature collapsed. And... Araki, are you okay? Chiemi appeared next to me like it was no big deal. So you were here? Well, yeah. We agreed that you'd be 100 steps behind me, but I went back and couldn't find you, so I thought you ran away or something. Well, I turned around and went back as you did. Hey, what if there was some sudden trouble? Do you have any idea how uneasy one can be if you lose contact just like that? So you instigated my distrust and waited until I turned around? This little... It's fine. It's just a prank, bro. We're enemies. There's a warped sort of trust between us, and I love it that way. Don't just play it off by saying everything I expected you to. Hey, well, I'd also like to complain about you thinking that I actually ditched you. Anyone would be uneasy after wandering in a forest for an hour. Oh, sorry. Araki, let's leave this for later. There's still work to be done. What do you mean? Wait, we were completely ignored by all the other brown bears still around us. Was that a problem? Well, I'll tell you later. She reached into her coat's pocket and took out a useful little tool, a hunting knife. Araki, don't look. You probably wouldn't like this. Chimi had surely gone on to dismantle the giant bear. I knew from the incident that she knew how to do that. I had no idea why this action was significant. However, at this point I didn't believe that she was doing something she shouldn't have. If that were the case, the brown bears watching over us wouldn't just sit by. And I also figured that me not watching the act was an important part of it. I was an outsider whose only role was bait, so I wasn't allowed to see the sight behind me. It took a long time. 30 minutes, an hour, maybe a lot less than that, but honestly actual time didn't matter here. It took as much time as it needed to. I spent the whole time waiting. I'm done. Upon hearing that, I finally stopped acting like a statue. Damn, did my joints hurt. Once I turned around, I saw no sign of the ominous brown bear. There was only a large wooden stick. It was taller than me, and at its tip it split into two and held up a pure white beastly skull like a weather vane. I vaguely understood that this was the result of her killing a god. Let's go back. I heard brown bear grunts in the distance, and it felt like they were urging us to come with them. Jimmy led me by the hand for a few minutes, and we made our way out of the forest surprisingly easily. The bridge I'd mentioned before had a bus stop with a phone booth nearby, so I used it to call road service. We got in a road service's car and returned to my bike, which strangely wasn't collapsed on its side. In fact, even the bag I'd thrown back at a bear chasing us was hanging on a handle. I looked at Chiimi's face, but her eyes seemed to be looking at something else. We then returned to a repair service in a nearby town and checked the damage. It was actually an early failure, and there was going to be a recall soon, but I needed it to work, so I just paid to have it fixed. Fortunately, they had spare parts, and the bag containing my wallet had returned to me, so I had no trouble fixing it. What was that all about anyway? Wanna know? Definitely. The brown bears were like gods that came to people carrying fur and meat. The locals somehow called a brown bear cub, but they would cherish and raise it, and have a major feast where they would kill it. That was considered thanks to the gods blessing them, and a ritual that sent the god back to the realm of the gods. But that one was never sent, apparently. Why? I don't know. The brown bear said that those who'd normally send them were gone. That was why he couldn't return to the realm of the gods and began acting strange because of it. At that rate, it would have become an evil god that harmed humans. That was why the brown bears asked me to send him to them. Huh. Oh, unsatisfied. It's a decent fantasy, but for the humans, it's basically a myth that justifies killing bears, right? I'm just not sure how the bears themselves could want it. My explanation just wasn't good enough. It's more like they wanted me to fulfill the humans' responsibility. They wanted me to release their brethren, bound and tied by the humans in the name of their god. I see. It makes more sense. And you do understand it, right? Everyone there was a god. I had a hunch. The forest itself wasn't human territory. It was an area close to the world of gods. Otherwise, we'd have been the main dish at the brown bear banquet. When we'd left the forest, Chiemi no longer had her arrows or quiver. Those things probably didn't quite belong to this world. We probably couldn't find those dwellings ever again either. It was probably a place created by the nostalgia of those who'd left, for some reason leaving behind the brown bear cub. Well, looking at it from the god fury standpoint, the information in our minds had probably been manipulated to suit their needs. That had to be it. No doubt about it. Those gods didn't have a weird form, so I wasn't afraid of them. But they probably weren't something you could get close to, huh? Yeah, that's right. Oh, your wrist? There was something unfamiliar on Chiimi's wrist. It looked like a bracelet made of fur-like material. I guess this is their thanks? Well, they couldn't leave tons of fur and meat for you. Yeah, probably. It's well made. I kinda like it. So you're the bear type of gal, huh? Don't say that. I just imagined something. What's that? That your power would lead to you having to solve tons of problems for the local gods. And you would get more and more stuff like that as your reward, eventually making it look like you didn't belong in the current era. That worry wasn't quite unfounded. Jamie had been born as the child of the snake and was exiled because of the corruption of Yomi. Her specialty as a girl from a family that watched over things might have merged with her fear of God to let her see God. She'd started out as a ruffian born into a harsh environment, but eventually she learned things, became strong, and grew up into a fine woman. Not to mention she had a hell of a weapon. Her origins, talents, career, fighting prowess, she was the perfect hero for a story of a god killer. This reminded me that she also had retained memories from previous loops during that incident. She could carry her memories over to the next time without borrowing Mitsuji's powers. That was probably the result of her god killer talent, giving her that ability as the most important weapon in that endless loop. She resisted, chased down, and eventually killed God, and her weapons were the memories from her previous loops. She herself couldn't use this ability properly, but with my planning she was able to kill God. Chimi was now a real hero, and as such she was probably in for a strange fate. That was what I was worried about, and made me wonder whether I had the right to stand at her side. Don't joke like that. Makes it sound too serious. Yeah. I played it off as nothing, and thankfully she didn't notice. But that would be kinda interesting. I mean, it would be a god hunt where I got more and more exotic goods with every kill. God slaying princess. Movie when? Wow, that sounds so toony. Roar. Hey, there's a bear 200 meters ahead. It's coming right at us. Is it a god who has another job for you? It's probably just a wild brown bear gone violent. A bear! There's a bear! Call the police. Call the Matag. Kimon Kamui, calm yourself. Let's run. Let's run. And so we'd experienced another divine, paranormal, incomprehensible scenario. Jimmy Serizawa, the hero, had gained some EXP, and I, who lived in reality, didn't quite like it. Though if our journey continued, I would soon become unable to deny it. And oh man, that was so scary, I couldn't bear it. God damn it. The end.